Were 18th century muskets really so inaccurate that soldiers barely had to aim? That is the common image. A line of men fires into smoke. The balls fly high, low, left and right. Some miss completely. Some strike the ground. Some disappear into the fog of battle. To a modern viewer, it can look almost absurd. Why would entire armies rely on a weapon that seemed unable to hit a single man at distance? But the truth is more complicated. The smoothbore musket was not a precision weapon. It was not meant to behave like a rifle. And under real battlefield conditions, its accuracy could collapse very quickly. But that does not mean it was harmless. At the right range, in the hands of disciplined troops and fired by hundreds of men at once, the musket could be devastating. The real question is not whether muskets missed. They did. The real question is why armies still trusted them. The basic problem was inside the barrel. A rifle has spiral grooves that spin the bullet as it leaves the weapon. That spin helps the projectile fly straighter. The common military musket had no such grooves. Its barrel was smooth. The soldier loaded a round lead ball down the muzzle with powder and paper cartridge. To make loading fast, the ball could not fit too tightly. It had to go down the barrel quickly, even when the weapon became dirty with powder residue. That loose fit mattered. When the musket fired, the ball did not travel perfectly straight. It could move slightly inside the barrel before it left the muzzle. Small differences in loading, powder, wind, barrel condition, and distance could change the shot. At close range, this was still dangerous. A man-sized target could be hit. A dense formation of men was even more vulnerable. But as the range increased, accuracy dropped sharply. Many experienced soldiers and later historians placed the practical range of smoothbore musket fire somewhere around 50 to 100 yards under battlefield conditions, though results varied widely. The musket was not designed for careful individual shooting at long distance. It was designed to put lead into a formation. Even if a musket performed reasonably well in controlled conditions, battle was not controlled. Black powder produced thick white smoke. After only a few volleys, a battlefield could become difficult to see across. Soldiers were not standing on a calm firing range. They were crowded into ranks. Men were shouting. Officers were giving orders. Drums and flags were trying to keep formations together. Cannon fire, cavalry, and enemy volleys added to the confusion. A soldier might not clearly see the man he was aiming at. He might fire into a mass of smoke. He might aim too high. He might hurry his shot. He might flinch. And after several rounds, the musket itself could become harder to load as powder fouling built up inside the barrel. So when people say muskets were inaccurate, they are often describing battlefield reality, not just a mechanical problem. The weapon had limits, the soldier had limits, and the battlefield made both worse. If the individual musket was unreliable at distance, the army had a solution: mass. One soldier firing at one man might miss. 500 soldiers firing at an enemy formation created a very different problem. They were not trying to hit a single button on a coat. They were firing into ranks of men standing shoulder to shoulder. Even imperfect shots could find a target somewhere in the formation. This is why volley fire mattered. The line allowed more muskets to fire at once. A deep column had many men trapped behind the front ranks. A long line spread firepower across the field. Timing also mattered. Officers did not always want men to fire as fast as possible. In many cases, they wanted controlled fire at the right moment. when the enemy was close enough for the volley to have real effect. A disciplined volley could tear gaps in a formation, but it did something else too. It attacked morale. A wall of smoke, sound, and lead could make even trained troops hesitate. And in 18th century warfare, hesitation could be fatal. This is where many myths begin. People judge muskets by the standards of rifles. A rifle was better for aimed shooting. Its grooved barrel gave the projectile spin, and that made it far more accurate at distance. But rifles had their own problems in much of the 18th century. They were often slower to load, more expensive and less convenient for mass armies that needed speed, discipline, and simple handling. That is why rifles were often used by specialists, riflemen, light infantry, hunters, or skirmishers. These men could use trees, walls, broken ground, and careful aimed fire. They mattered. They were not imaginary exceptions, but they did not replace the main battle line overnight. Most armies still needed large bodies of infantry that could move together, fire together, resist cavalry, and hold ground. The musket was not the best weapon for every task, but for line infantry, it fit the system. Fast enough to reload, simple enough to train, reliable enough for campaign use, deadly enough when hundreds fired together. So, were muskets really that inaccurate? Yes, if you mean compared with rifles. Yes, if you mean individual shooting at longer ranges. Yes, if you mean a battlefield filled with smoke, noise, fear, and confusion. But no, if you imagine them as useless weapons that could barely hit anything, that is the wrong picture. The musket was a battlefield tool built for a specific age. It worked through formation, discipline, short range, and massed fire. It did not need every soldier to be a marksman. It needed the regiment to stay together. When the enemy came close enough, a controlled volley could be terrifying. And if that volley broke the enemy's formation, the musket had done its job. The age of the musket was not an age of foolish generals using worthless weapons. It was an age of armies adapting to the limits of their technology. The musket missed often, but the line did not need every shot to hit. It only needed enough of them to land at the right moment.